Every city has the same basic problem. People live in close quarters. They eat, they work, they sleep, and every day, waste accumulates. In modern cities, this problem is largely invisible. Waste enters a pipe and leaves the home. Most people never see where it goes. For most of history, this was not the case. Before underground sewer systems, waste had to be managed in the open, using simple tools and regular routines. It was stored near homes, it was collected by hand, and it was removed from the city on a schedule. This process was slow, repetitive, and necessary. In this video, we'll look at where city waste went before sewers existed, and how this ordinary system functioned as part of everyday urban life. Any place where people live for long periods produces waste. This includes food scraps, animal manure, and human waste. In small settlements, waste could sometimes be managed informally. People lived farther apart. Open land was nearby. Cities changed this balance. As populations grew denser, waste accumulated faster. It could not be ignored. It could not be left where it was produced. Removing waste became a routine task, not an emergency response. Waste management usually began inside the home. Most households relied on containers. The most common was the chamber pot. Chamber pots were simple vessels, often made of ceramic, metal, or wood. They were used at night or during bad weather. In the morning, the contents had to be emptied. In wealthier homes, servants handled this task. In poorer homes, it was done by family members. The waste was not poured into a drain. It was carried to a storage location nearby. The most common storage method was the privy. A privy was a small structure built over a pit dug into the ground. The pit collected waste over time. These pits were known as cesspits or cesspools. Some privies served a single household. Others were shared by multiple families. In crowded cities, space was limited. Pits were dug close to buildings, wells, and streets. Cesspits were designed to fill slowly, not empty themselves. Eventually, they required manual removal. Not every home had a private privy. Many buildings relied on shared facilities. Courtyards, tenements, and inns often had one pit for many users. Cities also built public latrines. These were placed near markets, city gates, or main roads. They were intended for short visits, not comfort. Cleaning responsibility varied. Sometimes it was assigned to city workers, sometimes to private contractors. Sometimes it was delayed until conditions became severe. At some point, storage became removal. This work was done by specialized laborers. Their titles differed by place and language. In English records, they are often called night soil men. The work was usually done at night or before dawn. This avoided crowds. It reduced complaints. It made the work easier to complete. These workers were familiar with the city's layout. They knew which pits filled quickly and which could wait. The tools were basic: buckets, shovels, large tubs, hand carts, or animal-drawn carts. The process followed a routine. First, the pit was opened. Then compacted material was loosened. Waste was lifted out one bucket at a time. Each bucket was transferred carefully. Spills caused fines and public anger. To reduce odor, ash or lime was sometimes added. Once containers were full, they were sealed or covered. Then they were moved away from the neighborhood. A typical work shift followed a familiar pattern. The crew arrived after dark, carrying tools and lanterns. Work began quietly. One worker loosened material inside the pit. Another filled buckets. A third loaded the cart. The pace was steady and deliberate. There was no reason to rush. Speed increased the chance of mistakes. After one pit was cleared, the crew moved on to the next. By morning, the carts were loaded and ready to leave the city. Waste was rarely dumped at random. Cities designated disposal areas. These were usually located outside city walls, often downwind, often downstream. Some waste was buried. Some was dumped into rivers. Some was transported to farmland. Human waste had agricultural value. Farmers used it as fertilizer. It was mixed with soil or composted before application. This created a loose cycle between city and countryside. Cities produced waste. Fields absorbed it. Most cities attempted to regulate waste removal. Rules specified when waste could be moved. Nighttime was common. There were fines for dumping waste in streets or near wells. Inspections existed, though enforcement varied. Households were often responsible for maintaining their own pits. Payment was required when removal was needed. Complaints were frequent. Records mentioned smells, leaks, and delays. Despite this, the system continued. Not all waste went into pits. Many cities used open gutters along streets. These channels carried liquid waste away using gravity. Rain was expected to flush them clean. During dry periods, waste accumulated. Street cleaners removed solid material by hand. They swept, scraped, and loaded carts. This work was constant and repetitive. Water supply was a constant concern. Wells were often close to cesspits. Leaks contaminated drinking water. People did not understand microbes, but they noticed patterns. Some wells were avoided. Some neighborhoods were considered unhealthy. Authorities occasionally ordered pits sealed or relocated. These measures helped, but only partially. Waste removal followed the seasons. In summer, heat increased odors. Disease spread more easily. In winter, frozen ground made digging difficult. Rain flooded pits. Drought hardened waste. Schedules adjusted, rules shifted. The system adapted as needed. Waste removal was low-status labor. It was physically demanding, poorly paid, socially isolated. Workers often lived at the edges of cities. Despite this, their work was essential. When waste removal stopped, cities reacted quickly. The routine mattered more than recognition. Not all cities handled waste the same way. Some relied heavily on river disposal. Others restricted it. Some reused waste extensively in agriculture. Others removed it entirely. Climate, geography, and law shaped these choices. There was no universal solution. As cities grew larger, old methods struggled. Pits filled faster. Distances increased. Costs rose. Complaints became more frequent. By the 18th and 19th centuries, alternatives were explored. Pipes and drains were introduced slowly. Older systems continued alongside new ones. Change took decades. Early sewers were not designed for waste. They were meant for drainage. Over time, waste entered these systems. Manual removal did not disappear immediately. For a long period, both systems existed together. Eventually, centralized sewer networks became dominant. Before modern sewers, waste removal was visible and manual. It relied on pits, carts, schedules, and labor. The system was imperfect, but it functioned. Cities survived because this work was done regularly and quietly. Modern sewer systems replaced these routines. But for centuries, this was how cities managed waste, not through technology, but through repetition, organization, and persistence.